To start, I'm Naomi Watkins, and I'm at USBE. I'm the secondary ELA specialist, former middle school English teacher, instructional coach, professor, researcher, a lot of things. And I'm excited to be with you today. How many of you are educators? You're in the classroom, you teach secondary English. How many of you are middle school secondary English? That was my home, obviously. High school? Okay, any instructional coaches in the room? Administrators? Curriculum directors? Okay, anything I missed?
Assessment.
It's okay. Just here because you love PCBL. Yeah. Okay. If you see me limping, it's because I pulled my MCL last week skiing, which is like the most privileged injury ever. Sounds lame, but that's just what's happening. So, and I forgot my clicker today, so it's my own fault that I have to move around. And now my slides are not advancing there, but they are on the screen.
Where did I close this door?
Yeah, go ahead. Jerry, what might be happening? Oh, I see. Hold on. Nope. Okay, so we're gonna end up having to look at this preview because it's being funky with the one laptop. So today, the learning intentions are that we're gonna talk about learner choice and agency, right, in secondary ELA. And my goal is, particularly if you're in the classroom, that you're gonna walk away today with at least one thing that you're going to do, that you're going to change, that you're going to infuse more learner agency into your secondary ELA classroom. So that's the hope. So what I want to do to start is having you think of a personal experience. This does not have to be you in a classroom. It could be just out and about, because I hope you're learning in a lot of different areas in your life, not just if you're in the classroom or at a training or whatever. But I want you to think of a personal experience where you felt you had the agency to learn what, when, and how you wanted, and that you were able to show that knowledge and that mastery in a way that you wanted as well. So I'm going to pause and let you think of an experience.
Depends on how you define some of these.
Everyone have something in your head? Okay. Mine would be skiing apparently lately. And I want you to then reflect on these two questions. So I'm not necessarily so concerned about what the experience is, but I want to have you reflect on how did that experience make you feel? And then think about what conditions were in place to help you have those feelings, right? Or to support your agency or to support your learning. So if you need to, you can write down some ideas. You can just think quietly. In a moment, you're going to turn to someone and talk, okay? So however you need to do that to capture some thinking about these two questions. And then when you're ready, you can turn and talk to somebody about it. If you aren't by somebody, find somebody.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you choose how you would like to find somebody. Krista needs somebody, and
I'm very high school. So maybe I wasn't totally
Same time, I was not prepared when I called. My experience is learning how to play.
I love them. They're good.
As I if you didn't get second.
Yeah, it's so thing. Where you at? That's so
People laugh at your stuff? Okay.
published books.
Okay, I'm going to bring you back. Hopefully everyone got to share something. So what were some of the feelings that came up that you were sharing? We can just shout them out.
Empowered.
Empowered?
Nice.
What else? What other feelings? Excited?
That was fun.
Motivated?
Gratified.
Gratified?
Respected.
Respected?
Confident.
Confident?
I don't feel respected.
Frustrated.
Why were you frustrated?
Because I think there's a certain level of frustrated every time.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be learning, right? There's not some type of growth or struggle. Yeah. It's not always a bad thing to be frustrated, right? Any other feelings that came up?
Did you say encouraged?
Encouraged. That's great. Yeah. And hopefully if you did actually learn it, like you moved through the frustration, you felt some type of like pride, right? Like, cool, I did this thing that I didn't know I could do and I did it. Like there's something very motivating, like you said, about that. Now, how often do you think your students feel that way in your classroom? Right? But I would imagine that we all want them to feel that way, right? That's why we're here. Yeah. So what about the conditions? What helped you feel those feelings? What happened? What was there?
Choice.
Okay, choice?
I got encouraging positive feedback.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Braxton.
Build some of the feedback, but a sense of competence breeds more motivation.
Yeah.
I'm starting to I want to see if I can go a little further.
Yeah, we call it self-efficacy, right? Like if I have confidence in what I can do, I feel like I'm going to be able to do it and I want to do more of it, right? I mean, there's a little bit of there's a good feeling that we want to have again. Yeah, Anna.
I think a team of people to support you in that journey was super important for the example that I've shared.
Awesome. Yeah, in the back.
It's an opportunity to make mistakes.
Yeah. And then be okay, right? I mean, there could be an opportunity to make mistakes. And then it's like, well, why did you do that? Like, like there's like, you don't feel like, oh, that was okay for me to do. Well, you learn that very quickly, right? So there was a safety piece too, probably, in whatever situation that you had there. Any other conditions? Yeah.
So part of the positive feedback allowed me to more or less experiment my example.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Lots of resources available.
But you could that were helpful too, right? Not just like, I don't need this or whatever, right? Okay. Anything else?
Maybe time,
Mm.
just at my own pace. Like if I can do it at my own pace and not feeling the pressure of like outside expectations.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel that as an adult. right? I mean, I feel like sometimes we think, oh, these are like kid feelings. I still feel all the kid feelings still as an adult, right? Which is then I talk to my therapist about. But like, you know, like we still feel the same feelings as adults that we did as kids. And like, you don't want to be the last one, you know, to be chosen for the team. You don't want, you know, like you want to be a part, you want to belong, you want to be a part of all these things and do so in a safe way. Yeah.
So one of them that goes with mine is collaboration. Like the example that I had thought of was a home remodel.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
You're doing the remodel yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
But one of the things that comes with it is like the need for collaboration with another interested adult, right? So my wife and like collaborating and deciding what we really want to see happen. And so
Like which door handles you're picking, things like that.
well, not that,
Oh, okay.
you know, but their collaboration is a big part.
Yeah. And then
Sure.
and then figuring out how do you, when you disagree, how do you come to a consensus that doesn't destroy the other person, right? You're like, no, those door handles are the worst, right? And, you know, you're a horrible person for wanting those door handles. I mean, that's not, I'm hoping, what's happening at your house. Yeah. Do you need something, Nate? I have this, but I guess that too. That's fine.
Just that clear button.
Ta-da. Good, now I don't have to yell. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we could talk about all of those different conditions for a long time, but we only have an hour, so I picked two. So we could go a little more in depth about these two. So we're talking about learner agency. There's these 4 components. Goal setting, which didn't come up, but an appropriate goal. But like you want to remodel your house, that's your goal, right? Or someone wants to run a marathon or whatever it is. Like there's a goal that you're working towards, and you know what that goal is, right? We're going to talk about choice today, and we're going to talk about voice. And we're going to actually touch a little bit on self-assessment at the very end, but we're not going to go in a lot of depth about it. I will say self-assessment, particularly in the English world where we use a lot of strategies, we're going in a lot of processes, is really, really important to think about, like, why did this work? Why did this not work? So we're really going to talk about choice and voice. And I saw this little graphic, which I really liked, actually, of talking about learner agency is out of this world. It's kind of elementary. I know we're secondary, but I'm going to pause. Well, I don't know if you can all read this in the back, but it says, having my questions shape my learning, exploring my wonderings, curiosities, and passions in school, knowing my strengths and stretches as a learner, genuine decision-making, having a genuine voice, showing and explaining my thinking in different ways, deciding how I want to share my learning, growth into the person I want to be, which many of the things you touched on, that you shared, touch on these various aspects. So as an English person, I became an English teacher because I like to read, right? And I like to write. I love books. I love story. Like, I just love a good story. That's really the bottom line. Anyone else become an English teacher because of that? I don't only like good story, but I believe in the power of story. I believe that it can change lives. So with that in mind, though, I do know that the things that I like to read, the stories that I like, may not be universal to everybody in this room. So the big question as an English teacher is often like, is this a really good story for my students? Or is it because I really love it? So I have a very vivid memory of my 10th grade English teacher. We were reading Jane Eyre. I actually liked Jane Eyre. I remember her like stroking the cover of Jane Eyre and being like, we love Jane Eyre, we love Jane Eyre, which
That's weird.
very weird. I know. But I mean, it was like her way to try to like convince us all that, I mean, particularly the boys in the room, that they were going to love Jane Eyre. I mean, it is kind of a weird story, right? But really, I mean, sometimes we are our worst enemies as English teachers. We feel like everybody needs to read this book or write this topic or whatever it is. I'm going to say no. Because really, if I go back to the reason why I became an English teacher, it's because I feel that story has the power to change lives, and that story is compelling, that it's about, that it reflects, our struggles as to what it is to be human, right? If that's really why I became an English teacher, then it doesn't really matter what stories we're reading, right? Although I know there's some people who are purists, but it really doesn't matter. So since you're all here, I feel like this is a pretty easy question. Like, we want to be doing things in our rooms that our students are really excited about and that really they care about, right? So here's a question to be thinking, like Karen talked about this morning, but like, what decisions am I making for students that they could make for themselves, right? And there's a whole list here. We're going to talk about the top 4. And the reasons I picked the top 4 is because in English, particularly, we are ruled by our texts and what we do with them, right? Pretty much. Okay, so anyone teach with essential questions? Already? Yep, you do. What essential question are you working with right now?
Just put me on the spot.
Sorry. You can think about it. When you think about it, you can let us know. Anyone else have an essential question you're working with your students right now? Yeah.
What does it mean to call a place home?
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Anyone else have an essential question you're working with? That's a good one too. Yeah, so if you're not working with essential questions, like if you're not structuring your instruction, your year, your whatever, around essential questions, I think the first step is here. Because, as Karen showed us in her thing, it's hard to go deep when you don't start with deep questions. If you're not asking, I became an English teacher because I love taking multiple choice questions about novels, right? I did not become an English teacher for those reasons. Your students are not in English to take multiple choice questions or to circle main ideas in paragraphs. That is not compelling. And anyway, no one wants to do that forever, okay? So really, essential questions and the way that we plan our instruction as English teachers really has to build on our student curiosities and wonders of the world, right? Because English is about exploring the world through story. So if we are not showing our students how to access story to explore their world, we are not doing our jobs. Right? If we're making them really good at circling main ideas and identifying author's purpose, I realize the standards talk about those things. But the point of all of that is to help kids comprehend text so that they can explore the world through story. And we skip that last part. Like, we forget to tell them that part. They just think, I'm here to identify the main idea and the author's purpose and the theme, and to plot the plot on that tape, this thing that I can't think of what it's called right now, the plot diagram. Have you all seen this picture before? The different it's like a cabinet of curiosities. Like, just think of all the questions that you could have just about even this picture. But really thinking about your student wonders, what did you worry about when you were a teenager? You talk to your kids. A lot of times people will say, do an interest survey. And usually those are I like soccer. Great. You can find books that are about soccer and things like that. But really thinking about, what are the things that kids are worried about and wondering about when they are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, right? They want to belong. They want to know how to change the world, what they worry about, social dynamics, all of those things literature can answer, right? So what makes a question essential is that it has to be open-ended, thought-provoking, intellectually engaging, promote discussion. So it's not what is the genre of mystery? That's not very interesting, right? Should raise additional questions, require evidence. It's something that you could revisit again and again and again, right? Those questions about what is home and what was the other one? Sorry, I forgot already. What was your question again? Yeah, you can revisit that again and again, particularly new events, new stories, provide new information. Okay, so the way that we typically teach English is on the left side. Let's say I'm using the novel The Outsiders, because everyone's usually familiar with that book, and it's often a book that's still taught. So if I'm teaching with a novel plan in mind, a lot of times I'll talk to teachers and I'll say, what are you teaching in your room? And it's not the essential question they share with me. They say, we're reading The Outsiders. Right? Cool. Or I'm doing a poetry unit, or I'm doing my argument and essay unit, or whatever, right? I would say, this is teaching novels and topics. We're reading The Outsiders and we're identifying themes. Now, if I say that to anybody out in the world, they'd be like, well, that sounds boring, right? And really, that's not what you're doing. Yes, sure, you're teaching The Outsiders. However, if you're using an essential question, it might be like, we're studying what it means to be an outsider in society, which is the opposite of that home question. This really helps get at DOK 2, 3, 4 levels. If we're just teaching The Outsiders, that means we're looking at the plot. Who is the main character? What was the climax of the story? Like, those are all very like DOK 1 and 2 questions, not very interesting. And that's often where we stop, right? Because we're teaching the novel. But if we're using an essential question, do I have to read The Outsiders to answer what does it mean to be an outsider in society? No, it's a good pick. There's so many books I could read to answer that question. You just opened up a whole world of choice, right? Just by doing that. So you'll see here, like, choice of many texts and tasks. Also, the strategy usage is viewed as a tool to answer the question. So if we're teaching over here, it's strategy usage is usually viewed as the end goal, right? Like, cool, you made inferences. Let me look at this graphic organizer and see that you made inferences. But like, why are you making an inference? Is it to fill out the worksheet? To get a grade? In a lot of classrooms, that's the case, right? Like, yeah, that is the case. But really, from like a literature standpoint, you're making an inference, because if you don't make the inference, you're not going to actually get the point of what's happening. And you wouldn't then be able to engage in answering this essential question. I'd be able to engage and finish the worksheet, but I wouldn't be able to engage with what literature really and reading really helps us to do. So this is much more focused on inquiry and mastery and less so on completion. And that really isn't just in switching the way that the lens of how you plan your instruction. So I'm going to say, if you're teaching the novel way, it's really going to be hard to infuse learner agency in a way that's not superficial. Okay? So if that's where your starting point is, like you're like, my goal is to start using essential questions, great, it's going to be a game changer for you. It doesn't mean that you're not necessarily using a lot of the things you already use. It's just restructuring the way that you use them. So for some people, this is a lot of information right there. Like, that's a big, big mind shift, but I just want to pause. Thoughts, questions? Yeah.
I think it's really good. I'm sorry I'm not talking very loud, but
Here, you can take the microphone.
yeah.
Okay.
So this really we've been doing essential question is should the primary objective of the U.S. criminal justice system be rehabilitation? And I don't know if anybody's doing that one. No. Okay. You know, I was wanting some more notes. But and then research it, write about it, debate it, do different things, and boy, that, because what's the right answer, right?
There isn't one.
And but you,
Right now, it's punishment.
yeah,
There's no
so
rehabilitation.
yeah, so it's just been amazing to learn about. How does Norway do it? Denmark.
Yeah, exactly.
How does Bukele do it in El Salvador?
Mm-hmm.
How does Russia?
Yeah, how does Russia? You know, on and on. And like you said, I got to think about that when you talk about literatures for the work, and also I think
Yeah.
about it. And yeah, I think if you start up the right essential question, you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Well, and your kids are always wondering aloud. We wonder aloud like this all the time, right? So it's just about becoming a good listener. Like have kids generate the essential questions. And a lot of the books you have, it's like, I know that you're often limited by what book is in the storage closet or whatever. Most of literature has universal themes. Like, you could read Crime and Punishment if you wanted for this unit. You could read something else, a short story. But usually we can fit the literature that we have to fit the essential questions that kids are thinking about. So have them come up with the questions. That would be a more advanced way to incorporate learner agency. But so if you are someone who has never taught with essential questions, start with you creating the essential questions and then and choosing choice from there. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I realize this is really small since my thing is not on present and it's not working, but I like this little continuum of thinking about agency from participant to making kids more of an entrepreneur, like they're the ones orchestrating all of it, which to me is very advanced as far as infusing learner agency. And if you read that and it like fills your body with fear, just breathe for a minute. Like I'm not saying like throw it all out and make the kids do all the things. Like no, like we're going to talk about baby steps for wherever you are. So first we're going to talk about choice of text. So when I talk about text, people like always have all these like, but what about this? What about my lower readers? What about my higher readers? Like on and on and on. So we're going to talk about some misconceptions about text and some recommendations. So one, and maybe you probably may hopefully already know this, that a high lexile, this is a misconception. A high lexile means that it's a more challenging text to read. You know that's not true, right? Why would that be? Yeah.
So my kids and I read Christmas Carol. I have the lexile like 550.
It's Dickens, so yes.
We struggled so hard just because of the antiquated phrasing, the different vocab.
Yeah, so lexile only takes into account the quantitative pieces of text, which means like counting syllables, counting the lengths of sentences. Do you remember A Series of Unfortunate Events, that series with Lemony Snicket? That scores really high on the lexile as well. But the writer, the narrator, is very friendly to the reader. Like he'll use like a word like surreptitiously and then like, immediately define it for you. So a very friendly narrator versus Dickens, I wouldn't call the most friendly narrator. Yeah, there was a hand over here too.
I was just gonna say, like, just because of a lexile narrative, it doesn't have much to do with the content. So sometimes kids struggle with a concept or a theme or something might not be developmentally appropriate for them. Diary of a Wimpy Kid has like a surprisingly high lexile.
Yeah.
Like, but it's probably not something that we're gonna teach our classroom. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, maybe.
when we have kids with like Heather Sky High, good luck finding literature that the night happens. Like it doesn't.
Sure. I mean, there is a tap out. I mean, it's harder to find. Yeah. Okay. So really going to whoever, I don't know your name. So your comment, but like, we really have to look at what makes the text difficult. Lexile is just a starting point. It doesn't actually tell me what is challenging about the text, right? So in the case of Dickens, it's the archaic language, it's the having the background knowledge. You all know of the study about baseball and reading comprehension. So 2 groups of students, they put kids who knew a lot about baseball in one group and the kids who didn't know a lot about baseball in the other group. And regardless of that's how they sorted them. They didn't care about their reading level at that point, and they had them read a text about baseball. And then they took a comprehension test. And the factor that influenced how they did was their knowledge about baseball. So kids who were lower readers but had high knowledge about baseball outperformed the high readers who had low performance about baseball. So our background knowledge and our world knowledge really do play a role in our comprehension. Readers are more engaged and can learn more from easier texts. It's a misconception, particularly in the secondary space. I don't know, like sometimes if you put an easy book in front of a teenager and they're like, it feels like a baby book, right? And that's really, really condescending. So we need to motivate by choice, and we're going to talk about that. Reading easier text leads to greater gains. That's not true. We need appropriate struggle, and some readers cannot read complex text. I hope that's not a misconception. That means then your instruction needs to provide the appropriate scaffolding to help them access the text. Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about some options. And you'll notice that I have done it as entry-level learner agency and more mid to high level. And this is your level. So I want you to take a look at these options, read them, and then I just want you to turn to someone next to you and talk about what ideas, things, or questions you have about these options, okay? Can I read? Do you want me to read for you? Or I see squinting, so that's why okay. So this one right here is student selected reading. And it needs to have an instructional purpose. So this is not like, we have 15 minutes to read. Open your book, set the timer, read, end the timer, close your book, and let's go back to what we're really doing today. It needs to have an instructional purpose. From a list you develop. So essentially, like, here's a list of books, you get to pick off this list. That would be very entry level when it comes to choice, right? I have this, as a teacher, have controlled the list of choices versus student selected reading. It still needs to have an instructional purpose about a student selected topic, theme, or genre. And I don't know where the question mark came from, but there it is. So that would be much more of a mid to high level learner agency piece. Does that make sense? So you have not regulated the choices. It's more open-ended choice. Yeah.
For the mid to high level for that first one, if a student selects a theme or a topic, then you advise which books are relevant to that theme.
Possibly.
Because I usually have default ones because I always have students in practice. Even if I give them a selection, they're like, I don't know. So I have try this one.
Sure.
There's default ones, but
well, remember, if you're teaching with an essential question, this will be guided somewhat by that, but there could be flexibility within that question too, right? I might take a different angle. Maybe with your question, it might be more like, I'm more interested in restorative justice type practices, or, and that's what I'm going to pick. But some kids thrive with open-ended choices. We all know this.
Yeah.
And that might be then when I need to actually intervene and provide you a little bit more structure to your choice. And that is going to depend on your learner. But you're going to have some kids who get really frustrated by you limiting their choice,
for sure.
Right? Just let me do it already. If you've ever felt that way yourself. Teacher selects short text to show students how to answer the teacher-determined essential questions. So you've decided the essential questions. You've selected the short text that you're going to use to show them how to answer essential questions or what to do with them. And they then select their own text to mirror your modeling, right? A little more mid to high level might be you still select the short text to show students how to answer the student-developed essential questions, right? And then they select text to answer their own questions, right? That would be a bump up as far as learner agency. Anyone done anything like these options already? You're doing this in your room? Good, awesome. How's it going?
Really well for some.
Because sometimes. Well, go ahead. Well, sometimes I don't know, there's feelings attached to some of this when you're like, I have to give up some control. And what's going to happen when I give up control? And the worries usually are mass chaos, right? My students will just it'll just be mass chaos. Now, does this mean you all of a sudden drop them into the highest amount of agency at the beginning of the year? Probably not. You're scaffolding the amount of agency that they have, helping support that, providing them with processes and scaffolding to make sure that they're successful, right? Because if you do just dump them into the deep end of all the choice in the world, it can be overwhelming, or I don't know. And part of that is also providing space for them to be this choice isn't working. Right? We've all had that where we pick a topic and we start researching it and we're I can't find anything about this. And then having the flexibility to shift and have a different choice, right? And I remember that happening to me and the teacher being oh, well, you picked it. You put it on this piece of paper 4 weeks ago. You're stuck with it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
How did you do the student, will you go over what it would look like if a student generated essential question? What does that look like? I get the entry level and I get the top part of the mid to high level. But what does that look like?
Well, it could look a couple ways. One, you could have a really big essential question, and then there's usually sub-questions below that too. So that might be a way that I would start, is I would have either it's a student-driven big class essential question, and then they generate their own questions below. And that's also teaching them about what makes a good essential question, right? Not a yes or no or whatever. So that's some modeling there too. But that might be one way to do it. Versus we have to do a research paper. What question is it that you want to answer? That might be then everybody has their own essential question.
Well, if
One way.
If the teacher has to come up with short texts to answer student-generated essential questions, there's a time lag there, obviously, right?
Yeah.
You can't just like pull out a short text and pop it.
No, you'd have to plan. So you would probably have them submit their essential questions to you and then get ready, right? And like not do everybody's essential question, but you might pick one and then like show how to do it with that too. Other questions about those? You notice I'm also saying like with these, the teacher is modeling with shorter text. It's easier to model when the text is short to show them how to do a skill and then get them doing the work, right? Like that's being part of this is also shifting the responsibility of who does the most work in classrooms. And usually I see very tired teachers and very bored students. So we want like our students to be working harder. So have them reading the longer text, you modeling with shorter text. And there's a lot of, an excerpt, you can do a lot with just an excerpt, as you know. We all sat through literature courses where like a professor like talked about a paragraph for like several class sessions, right? Yeah. Okay. More options. So we have the teacher selects an anchor text. So that might be like The Outsiders, right? And students select supplemental text to respond to teacher-directed questions. So a little bit of a shift. So you're using a novel as opposed to a shorter text. I'm not opposed to whole class novels, but just know, like, you have to be very particular in the novel that you pick, right? Because you've elevated it to be the end all be all, like this is on a pedestal type piece. Versus students create their own text sets to respond to student developed essential questions. Now, what might that look like? So like, let's take your question again, which was again, what?
Should the primary objective of the criminal justice system be rehabilitation?
Okay. Just a very light question. Then I would probably have my students develop sub-questions below that. Like, what questions about this question do you have? What is it specifically that you want to know? They would then go out and find text, right? Like articles, maybe a novel, etc. Like maybe you make parameters as to what the text set needs to have. Like you need to have 1 novel, 3 research articles, blah, 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 blah. And they create their text set to then answer that essential question. But we do that with research projects all the time, right? But usually we're a little more direct. We often are a little more directed. Okay, other option. Teacher selects the text for literature circles. And the students choose the text they want to read. I see this one a lot, right? A teacher picks 5 novels, they usually book talk them, and then the kids sign up for whatever book they want to do, and then they're in literature circle groups. And a literature circle is also more directed too. Usually you have assigned roles, like you're the investigator, and you're the word wizard, and you're the, I don't remember all the names, but. And so they can choose either what tasks they're gonna do, or you've assigned it. I mean, that's a literature circle. The other option is students determining those essential questions and the text they want to read in book clubs or independently. Now, a book club is a little different than a literature circle. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. To me, a book club, you don't have assigned roles. It's kind of like if you are in a personal book club, it's not like you show up and the host is like, you're the word wizard and you're the illuminator and you're the... I'd be like, I don't want to be in this book club. I actually don't even want to talk about the book. I just want to eat, and talk.
Clubs too.
You have those clubs too. I actually, for a while, was in a poetry club where we read poetry anthologies, and we really did talk about the poetry for like 20 minutes, which I thought was like a win. And then like the other 2-3 hours was just eating and talking, which I feel like is a good balance for a social thing, right? In your classroom, obviously, you would want to spend more than 20 minutes and not just eating and chatting. But more mid to high level is they would decide the essential questions, they would pick the books, and then they would run the club. So they would decide the pace of the reading, how much the reading they are, the questions they're going to ask, etc. And I was able to get 7th graders to do that. Now, that was more of an end of the year, like, thing that they were doing, a lot of modeling, starting with literature circles, releasing that responsibility and giving them more agency as they develop those skills. Yeah, I saw a question.
What does that look like with like district approved book lists and peer permission, like all of those things that we're thinking about a lot right now to keep ourselves out of trouble? If it's student choice, are they outside of those parameters of like approved book lists? Or do we need to say, look, this is what's approved for us to read in this classroom? You need to keep it to this list. Like how does that work practically?
So it's going to depend on your district and the policy, because not all policies are universal across the state. So that's my first. But with that said, what's happening there, right, is that your teacher agency is being limited. I'm being recorded. Your teacher agency is being limited, which then means you have limits on the amount of learner agency you can give in that space.
Well, is it like, because I know if I assign a book, I'm gonna make sure that we're good,
Well, you should have read it at least, right? Like that's the first step.
At least heard of it.
I'm gonna assign them, but if it's like, sorry, for those things.
Teacher.
Or if they're choosing it, can I just like send home? I guess that is a question for the district, like.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on your district. It used to be, and I can't speak to, again, it's going to depend on where you are, but if a kid brought a book and they chose it, then I was like, well, then if there was the parent was upset, I'd say, well, then pick a new one, right? But I still think if you are here, if you're wanting to be here, letting them pick the essential questions even, and then having to pick from a list, that's still you can pick all the books in the school library. That's still a lot of choice, right? So, I know that it's but there still is a lot of space and choice as far as going to the library. You need to answer this essential question, which is guiding that. So it's not like they're picking anything. It's going to be limited by, does this actually answer the question or not? There's still going to be a lot of choice.
Yeah, and some students prefer that because it's not so overwhelming.
But there's also choice in I'm going to need to find an article, or I need to find this and that. There's not every book can be on a list for you to use. But I understand that's a reality. So if your teacher agency is limited, it is going to limit the amount of learner agency you can give. That's just the reality of it. Do you have other thoughts? Yeah.
Well, you might have this already planned, but the challenge that our PLC faces is holding kids accountable. When you give them this much choice, even when you don't give them choice, holding kids accountable for what they read, right? And there are only so many reading quizzes that can fail before, or whatever. It's reading quizzes are GOK1. It's not great. So
you can also cheat a reading quiz.
I know.
The truth is that they don't read. They just, even with the choices, we're really struggling to get kids to read outside of class. So how do you hold them accountable when you're giving them this choice?
Well, I have ideas, but does anyone else have ideas?
I was gonna say, if they're really, I just say, if you want to pick that book, that sounds great to me. I can't wait to see what the first chapter looks like, kind of visual, slideshow, whatever, just to see that they're actually doing it.
So, a lot of it is we've conditioned kids to not see reading as important, and that they can get the tasks done without having to do the reading. Right. And that's not on us. It's about all, particularly outside of English. We all know our classes where you're like, oh, I don't actually have to do the reading. I just have to show up for the lecture, and you're going to tell me everything that was in the reading. So we've conditioned kids to think that they don't have to do the reading to be able to do the tasks. So part of it hinges on making sure the task, you have to be able to read and do so in order to be able to complete the task. But it has to be a compelling thing for me to want to persevere to do. That's not something that happens overnight, though, because you have to work against the conditioning, right, of that. I think we do, giving reading quizzes is probably not the way to do it, because I can take a reading quiz and not read the book and still do pretty well. I can guess pretty well.
That's why I think it's more about show me your interest or your passion rather than just show me stuff you could memorize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, great process, not end product. That helps too.
Yeah. Process versus product. And there was a hand back here too.
It's like something we've done, like using Romeo and Juliet, that shows students are proficient in anything, one recommendation, that kind of thing. Out of the quiz over like geopolitical type stuff, like what did Mercutio do? What did he say? But then when they get enough points correct, they unlock that next level. And then they did show how they understand it at a deeper level.
Okay. Yeah.
So how would you even like recommend addressing like students making batches? So
Oh,
if I get students, let's say I give them 20 tests.
I wouldn't say not a bad choice, just a, yeah, okay. Yeah.
You know, 10 texts. I have a lot of people saying they're just gonna go to the short ones. They don't care if it's, you know, maybe it's a 10-page Herman Melville, but it's a 10-page quantum theory. They're gonna be a 2-page quantum theory because it's shorter, even though it didn't.
So I'm going to go to the near the end for a minute to address your question. So a big piece is having, like I said, having kids reflect on their choice. And sometimes we have to give them space to make not the greatest choice, right? So they might have picked the shortest one. Cool, you finished it fast. Cool. But you know, like, so here are some questions that you might ask, right? Like, why did you make that choice? And it could be, I picked it because it was the shortest. I mean, making them have to own up to it sometimes. Verbally say like, well, I picked it because it was short.
Or easy.
Or easy. You're like, okay, well, thank you for being honest. I mean, we all do this. I mean, we say like, oh, it's a bad choice, but we all do this in our lives. Like, oh, I'm gonna, you know. How did it work out? How did this choice set me up for success or did not, right? Or what did I learn from making this choice? Or what would I make this choice again? Why or why not? I mean, that's a great question after like, well, I picked it because it was short. Well, would you do it again? And they might be like, yeah, it got me what I wanted. I got the task done. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, it's honest. But I do think the reflection piece is really important as far as their choice. And for some kids, it's going to redirect them the next time. It was like, yeah, I did it because it was the shortest, but I found it really boring. Well, then in that case, what could you do next time, right? And have them own those choices. Does that help a little bit? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about tasks because they are tied together. I do want to point out that there's all types of different types. That's a horrible sentence. There's a lot of different types of knowledge in the world, right? We have knowledge about different disciplinary discourse and practices, like what we do as English people, right? Or what the historians do, what the mathematicians do, what the geographers do, scientists, etc. So we're teaching kids how to be a part of that type of community. When you became an English major, you became a part of that community. You learned that discourse. When I got my PhD, I was actually told to stop writing like an English major. I had to learn the discourse of the academic community, right? We talk about knowledge of language in ELA, right? Words, morphology, syntax, different text signals. We have to teach kids that. We also have to teach them knowledge of text. So text genres, text structures, visuals, different formatting features, all of that. All of that is in the ELA standards. The piece that's not is this knowledge of content in the world, right? To me, that is where all the choice resides. This is already dictated to you in your standards. But remember that all of this knowledge is helping kids to learn knowledge about the world, what it means to be human. All of those things that we talk about in the humanities, that the world is our oyster there. Like, so much choice, even as an educator. So, and that's often where your essential questions come from. Although they can come from here too, right? They can come from there as well. So when we're thinking about tasks, and she talked about this in the keynote a little bit, we have tasks that are just to build our knowledge and mastery, like to help learning tasks, to help us learn, to help us do. Like if you're in sports, it's like different drills, like you're doing different drills to help you learn how to dribble or whatever. And then we have tasks that are there to display our actual mastery, more of an assessment, a formative assessment. We also, in English, have tasks. Also, it's really hard to say text and tasks together. I just want you to know that. We have tasks that are inside the text. We have to use the text to do them. And we have tasks that are beyond the text, right? This is more DOK 3 and 4. So you're moving beyond the text to do the tasks. I will also want to add that those tasks need to include reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Now, we tend to favor reading and writing in English. The speaking and listening standards are really important too, even though I know we don't assess them on a state level, okay? The other piece is really thinking about making sure that the tasks are authentic to answering the essential questions, right? Like it's not like this arbitrary task that you wouldn't, I don't know, maybe you could write a cartoon about this really serious topic, but like it doesn't, it might not fit the tenor of the question, right? Or it might be that maybe now an authentic task maybe with the essential question about prison reform is that they write a letter to a legislator or they petition for something, right? Because that would be authentic to the type of question that they're answering. So some options for providing learner choice of tasks. So you might have a teacher-selected novel with student choice in the final project. That would be people do that all the time, right? Like, we're going to read The Outsiders, and now you're going to do like a movie or a song or whatever it is to do the actual final project. The same learning objective, same standard, but everyone has a different medium that they're using to do. And we've been doing that stuff for a very long time. But I just want to put it up there, very entry level. Another option might be that the student selects the novel and the student has choice in the final project. That would be much more high level. It's both, right? I have choice in my text and choice in my task. Choice boards, you all know what I'm talking about or a menu, to me is more of an entry level piece, particularly if you're creating all of the choices, right? But we heard that example from the one teacher in the session talking about how the world building class, where the students are creating the menu and the parameters and all of that, right? It sounds fun. Like that sounds like you heard, I don't know about you, but I heard him describe that class and I was like, I want to take that, right? Anyone do this? Students creating the menu and the parameters, anyone to that point yet? Okay, there's a goal. Student-directed activities with the same pacing for all students. Let's be more entry level. Or students choose how they divide up the class time to complete these activities, right? Because, learning about I know this one's going to take me a couple minutes and this one I'm going to be I'm going to struggle more, so I'm going to spend more time on the one that I'm going to struggle with versus the one that I'm going to do really quickly. Those are all things we want our students to be able to learn. Teacher directs each stage of the writing process with choice of topic. So, today we're all going to pre-write, and tomorrow we're all going to draft, and then we're going to move to this next piece, etc. That would be more low level, entry level. Or students select the writing strategies throughout the writing process, moving at a self-directed pace. I remember back in the day when I had to create index cards for research projects, we had to put one fact on each index card, and then you had to put the source on the back, and we had to actually use the periodical guide of whatever it was called, And I hated those note cards. They didn't work for me. I was much more of an outliner. So I actually did my whole research paper, wrote it, and then went back and created note cards because those had to be turned in for points. So not all strategies work for everybody, right? And that would be a great thing for kids to be able to choose flexibly from a range of strategies. You obviously would have to teach all those, but that would be choice too as far as the task. Not everyone has to create a web. What is the point of a web? It is to help generate and organize ideas, right? There's a lot of ways to do that. Let them have choice in that task, right? Some people are going to have an idea really quick and they're going to move forward. Let them go, right? Of course, the thing that didn't get answered for me in this session is eventually the semester ends. There has to be an end point to all of what they do. I teach a class at the University of Utah. And students I don't have a late work policy, just get it done and you did it. And it's so they're are you sure? There's so much trepidation. I'm There is a deadline this semester because I don't want to fill out incomplete paperwork, but you can move at your own pace, right? As long as you get it done. Any thoughts about these? My big thing with talking to ELA teachers is also, please connect what you're having them read to what they're writing about. And having what they're writing about be what they're reading about and talking about and listening about. Because what I often see is like, we're reading Romeo and Juliet. We're gonna do that, and then we're gonna write narratives. And they're gonna spend all this time over here on narratives, great. Or we're gonna read this and we're gonna write about something completely different, and the kids never see the connection between why we read and we write, and we speak and we listen. So please start connecting those things together. You will save yourself so much time. Okay, I have like a minute left. We were gonna have time to look at these, but we did not. What I provided here for you are a lot of different, more tangible ideas of how this might look in classrooms. So a lot of these are written by teachers who have been doing this, but feel free to explore in your own time. More entry-level resources, more mid to high-level resources. Some of them are tied specifically to the things that we looked at. So like if you're interested more in book clubs, there's some resources about how to do a book club, etc. Okay? We were gonna have time for you to be able to do that, but I wanted to be answering your questions is probably more relevant to what we need to do. So in the 30 seconds that we have, I want you to think about like, what is one thing you're gonna try that's new? Is it gonna be text? Is it gonna be tasks? What are you thinking about right now? And then I want you to turn to someone and share that. Go. You can tell me.
So I really like reflections and self-assessments for students because I think they gain more autonomy, like with the ability to for themselves and how they're doing, kind of thing.
Cool.
And like I liked how you said in there, like when they're going through those questions, I've often said that to my students. Well, how did that work out for you? To the very key phrasing of the block. I work mainly online with students who think they're self-motivated and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And so keeping them on tasks and getting them to move through, I'm like, how does that work out for you when you waited,
Yeah.
this
And making them own it, right?
yeah. And so they're like, oh yeah. And it's just some of that, you almost see the lights turn on.
Like, oh, maybe I should have done it like that. Yeah. Okay, anyone willing to share what you're gonna try? Like 2 people. What are you gonna do?
I said, focusing on what is the point of the school year with, tests already kind of determined and whatnot, but looking at the tasks and getting the ownership kind of back to the students and adjusting for next year with the tests.
Awesome. That's great. Anyone else? What are you gonna try? We're gonna try something. Okay. You're like, it's time to go. It's lunchtime, or I don't even know what time. Yeah. Okay. So please, if you try stuff, I'd love to hear about it, how it goes. Or even if you're like, I know I'm at the state and you're like, oh, that's that lady at the state. So who I might get a newsletter from every once in a while, right? But if you try something and you want to work through it, like, let's talk about it. Like, it's like you start trying something, like, I have a question, please email me. I would love to just like, come, watch, let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to get your kids to read books. Like, let's do it. Why not? So please take me up on it. A lot of people don't, but I am offering myself. Anyway, lovely. Thank you for coming. I hope you got something to do today. Yeah, awesome.
And boards,